mid-morning, we could explore an excerpt of the Heart Sutra and then meditate. This is Lama Jigme Gyatso of the Buddha Joy Meditation School. Welcome to Meditate Like a Jedi, which is brought to you by the kind-hearted folks who help support this channel on Patreon. This mid-morning, we could chant and meditate and enjoy a lesson or two, but first, if you love Star Wars and you wish to meditate as profoundly as Ahsoka Tano on Lothal, be sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell. Good news. If at any point during this mid-morning's live stream, any point at all, you have a specific question about Buddhist meditation or Buddhist philosophy or how to apply them to your life, simply type your question in great detail in the chat window on the right-hand side of the screen. I'm going to take a moment to blow my nose. Let's take a gander at the next portion of the eighth page, next bit of the Heart Sutra. So it reads, looked upon the five skandhas and seeing they were empty of self-existence. Well, who looked? Avalokiteshvara. Who is Avalokiteshvara? Avalokiteshvara is a Sanskrit name. It could translate into Chinese as Kuan Yin or Quan Chi Yin, Pusa. It can translate into English as the one who notices the cries of the world. Whether actual or merely archetypical, we're told that the personification of compassion leads us to wisdom. So here is something really interesting. The litmus test of your meditation is how much spontaneous love does it produce. If your meditation session makes you cranky, then in the words of Bugs Bunny, I think you took a wrong turn in Albuquerque. But when mindfulness and meditation are practiced correctly, they help us to access the highest love, which is spontaneous and uncontrived. Now, there's been a lot written about Buddhism over many centuries by many people, the majority of which did not have great expertise. So, needless to say, mining the wasteland of Buddhism for the precious ore of useful techniques can seem daunting. Then why do it? Empathy. You have empathy for yourself. You don't want to suffer as much as you do. You have empathy for others. You see them beat up by life, by their bodies, by their relationships, by their own minds. Empathy is the engine that drives Empathy is the fuel that drives the engine of mindfulness and meditation. Let's continue. So Avalokiteshvara looked upon the 5 skandhas. What's a skandha? Skandha could be, a skandha could be translated as either heap, and a more fancy term would be aggregates. If you spend some time reading a lot of so-called translations of the Buddha's teachings, you'll find he used many, many different systems to organize experience. Sometimes he organized it in 5 points, sometimes in 12 points, sometimes more, sometimes less. So we don't need to get hung up on that. But 5 is a really popular number in Mahayana Buddhism, probably because it's a prime number. And we have 5 digits on our hand, so that's really handy. So the 5 skandhas, according to my Tibetan teachers, could be described as form, feelings or perceptions, appraisals, which would be the intensity or the volume of the perceptions, impulses or knee-jerk reaction to the perceptions, and consciousness, awareness. Our ability not just to perceive, but to emote, intend, reason, recall, and imagine. So we call this mess the 5 heaps, or what I think Elvis would describe as a hunk burning love. And so now we come to the crux of the matter. And of course, being a geek, I can't say crux without thinking of Horcrux, but that's completely different. So we continue, seeing they were empty of self-existence. What does that mean? In a nutshell, we evolved in such a way that our brain is actually better described as brains. There are many disparate components that sometimes work in cooperation, sometimes work independence, and sometimes work in competition with each other, which can be a barrel of monkeys. But arguably, if you're sitting upright like I am right now, the lowest part of your central nervous system would be the spinal cord itself, which houses your autonomic nervous system. Part of it corresponds with inhalation and noticing, and the other corresponds with exhalation and relaxing. So what has that to do with emptiness? Every time we physically relax in harmony with our exhalation, whatever we noticed during our previous inhalation could at least momentarily feel as if it was as non-graspable as a vast, empty void. Now, a simile is only as effective as it is relatable. So, what is a real-world example of a non-graspable, vast, empty void? A wonderful example can be seen when we consider the illusion of the infinite azure sky on a bright, beautiful, cloudless morn, which, although could be tantalizing to the eye, is intangible to the hand. So that's the idea of emptiness, that although you can perceive it, it feels ungraspable. Now, don't fall into the rabbit hole of saying, oh yes, everything is empty, and anything that isn't empty is an illusion. That's a slippery slope. Think of it this way. We have the mechanism to perceive and the mechanism to release. There was a gym commercial several years ago where a guy speaks with a thick Austrian accent, and all he can say in English is, I pick it up and I put it down. And of course, that wasn't an Austrian accent, sorry. But humans are the same thing. We With our minds, metaphorically, we pick things up, we perceive them, and then we release them. It could be argued that the quality of our peace and happiness is directly proportional to our ability to both perceive and release. The more that mechanism is hindered, the more craptacular our existence is going to be. And nobody wants that. Self-existence is an ungainly term right here. See, self-existence. That's an ungainly term to describe the illusion of independence. Because you can ask a physicist, you can ask a neuroscientist, you can ask a biologist, they'll tell you there is no independence. It's nothing more than a mental abstraction. Everything is dependent upon everything else. If not directly, then indirectly. If not overtly, then subtly. If not actually, then potentially. If not immediately, then eventually. Things are affected by other things. Things affect other things, whether we want them to or not. Those who tout the idea of independence usually do so with the intention of manipulating others. For instance, I live in the United States of America, and before I was born, Dr. Martin Luther King observed in a public speech that in America we have rugged individualism for the poor and socialism for the very, very rich. Asterisk C, corporate bailouts. And negative income tax rate for profoundly wealthy corporations, and not taxing the uber wealthy and overtaxing the under wealthy. And of course, there's a wonderful word, and it will occur to you in a moment. Subsidies. Subsidies for highly profitable industries that are killing the planet, and no subsidies for the technologies that could save the planet. So yeah, there is great injustice in my country, and my country does not corner the market, does not hold the patent on injustice and manipulation. Wherever there are people with more power and more money than others, there's going to be a high probability of manipulation. I once spoke to a young man who was diagnosed with general depression. And his parents were saying, you shouldn't be depressed. Shame on you for being depressed, and shame on you for having the symptoms of depression. Maybe his parents meant well, but they were multiplying his stress. We are not all created equal. There are different types of intelligence. There are different types of health. There are different types of beauty. There are different types, there are different skill sets. I'm not sure, but I think it was Einstein who said, if a fish compares himself to a squirrel, he will forever feel himself a failure. So, one of the keys to mental health that we can extract from this sliver of the Heart Sutra is this. There is no independence. They say that Missouri is the home of the show me joke. You show me a self-made man, I'll show you the Frankenstein monster. There are no self-made men or women. There are people who have been assisted by society or thwarted by society. Independence is an illusion. So, what is the takeaway? The takeaway is this. The key to meditation is perception and release. Emptiness is nothing more than a metaphor to help us understand the sensations we experience during that process. Now let's turn our attention to the actual practice text, the latest iteration of Easy Meditation's Proto-Zen. I had some fizzy water, and I thought it was still water, and I added hot water to it. That's a unique sensation. Whoa. So, anywho, let's get it on. Let us begin by performing a chant to stimulate the neural pathways responsible for empathy and enthusiasm. Wrong button. Here we go. Together. May I liberate all beings from the tyranny of hating, craving, and clinging by relying on the Buddha's example, instructions, and students. May I liberate all beings from the tyranny of hating, craving, and clinging by relying on the Buddha's example, instructions, and students. May I liberate all beings from the tyranny of hating, craving, and clinging by relying on the Buddha's example, instructions, and students. Let us now recite this triplet, this set of 3 lines, this empathetic wish for the universal transcendence of obstacles. May all beings' obstacles to wisdom, love, health, and good fortune now be pacified completely. May all beings' obstacles to wisdom, love, health, and good fortune now be pacified completely. May all beings... Take 3. May all beings' obstacles to wisdom, love, health, and good fortune now be pacified completely. Together, let us recite the entirety of the Heart Sutra. If you find any portion puzzling, simply type your question in the chat window. The Nirmala Buddha Bodhisattva, while practicing the deep practice of Prajnaparamita, looked upon the 5 skandhas and seeing they were empty of self-existence. Said here Shariputra, form is emptiness, emptiness is form. Emptiness is not separate from form, form is not separate from emptiness. Whatever is form is emptiness, whatever is emptiness is form. The same holds for sensation and appraisal, impulse, and consciousness. Here Shariputra, all dharmas are defined by emptiness, not by birth or destruction, purity or defilement, completeness or deficiency. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness there is no form, no sensation, no perception, no impulse, and no consciousness. Aha, this is what I wanted to fix. No I, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, and no mind. No shape, no sound, no smell, no taste, no feeling, and no thought. No element of perception surmised to conceptual consciousness. No causal links from consciousness to old age and death. No end of causal link from consciousness to old age and death. No suffering, no source, no relief, no path, no knowledge, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, without attainment, Bodhisattvas take refuge in Prajnaparamita and live without the wall of the mind. Without walls of the mind and thus without fears, they see through delusions and finally accomplish nirvana. All Buddhas, past, present, and future, also take refuge in Prajnaparamita and realize unexcelled perfect enlightenment. You should therefore know the great mantra of Prajnaparamita, the mantra of great magic, the unexcelled mantra. The mantra equal to the unequal, which heals all suffering and is true, not false. The mantra in Parashaparamita is spoken thus. Gate gate pada samgate buddhi swaha. We come now to our actual meditation. This set of techniques known as mindfulness and meditation together are known as by many names, such as Zen, Chan, Dhyana, Mahamudra, Hatha Yoga, Dzogchen, and Trekcho, or slice through. Despite the grandiosity of its name, the technique is fairly simple. We practice mindfulness by silently and mentally reciting the demonstrative pronoun this during our inhalation. And we practice meditation by silently and mentally reciting this 3-syllable verb relaxing during our exhalation. And now, let's meditate. let us seal our practice with a bit of the old wishing love. May everyone be free from stress, may everyone be happy. May no one be separated from the happiness. May everyone have balance from the tyranny of hating, craving, and clinging, freed. If you feel that I have earned it, you could type something in the chat window. You could give this live stream a thumbs up. You could share it with a friend. You could even help support this channel on Patreon. In approximately 3.5 hours, I would very much like to return to lead today's afternoon meditation. Until then, may you and yours be happy and healthy. And if you are as geeky as me, this is the way.